Welcome to the Personal Protective Equipment module, which has been designed to raise awareness and help keep you safe at sea. Recall the hierarchy of controls. The most effective control is elimination, followed by substitution, isolation, engineering, and administrative controls, and finally, personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment may be considered as the last line of defense against a safety hazard. Let's look at an example. Oliver drops a box of frozen prawns on his foot while unloading the snap freezer. He is wearing thongs and the impact results in a fractured toe and tissue damage. Oliver could have avoided injury had he followed company policy and wore the protective boots that were issued to him. In this instance, failure to comply with an administrative control and wear personal protective equipment resulted in a severe foot injury, possibly hampering his ability to work. In another example, David is using a grinder without eye protection to cut through a SeSAFE. As David is cutting the shackle, the grinder disc breaks, and a fragment hits him in the eye. Sadly, during surgery to remove the disc fragment, David loses sight in his eye. If David had been wearing safety glasses or goggles, his injury would have been avoided. Again, we see how wearing personal protective equipment can prevent potential injury or worse. To determine what personal protective equipment is needed for a task, it is important to first identify the risks associated with the task. For example, if you are using a grinder to cut a shackle, you may determine that the risks include eye injury, damage to hearing, and cuts and abrasions to hands. To mitigate these risks, you will require eye protection, hearing protection, and hand protection. You will also need to consider the environment where the task is performed. For example, if the grinding task is performed over water, it may be necessary to wear a personal flotation device, or if the task is performed in a wet environment, it may be necessary to wear rubber boots and gloves to avoid electrocution. Administrative controls are particularly useful to assist individuals to comply with requirements for personal protective equipment, including those mandated by the boat owner or skipper. This includes policies requiring the use of personal protective equipment to mitigate an identified risk, for example, wearing a personal flotation device while working on the deck in heavy seas. It also includes policies requiring all individuals to be trained in the correct use of specific personal protective equipment, and it includes signage to identify specific risks, such as earmuffs when entering the engine room. When working on a boat, administrative controls and personal protective equipment may be the only options available to minimize a safety hazard. Other controls, such as elimination or substitution, may simply be too expensive or difficult to implement. Finally, using personal protective equipment is not a sign you are weak, even if not used by others on the boat. Personal protective equipment can prevent injury, which may result in your inability to work, loss of job, or in the worst case, permanent disability or loss of life. Taking steps to be safe is not a sign of weakness. Well done! You have completed the Personal Protective Equipment Awareness module. Now let's review the material that we covered.